My name's Milo, and if you're reading this, you're probably looking for a story. Not just any story, but one that gets under your skin, makes you question the shadows at night, and leaves you feeling a bit colder inside. I've lived that story. It's not about ghosts or haunted houses, it's about something far more real and terrifying. The human mind and its capacity for darkness. I was 16, living in a place most would call a concrete jungle, but jungles are alive, thriving with nature. Where I lived, the housing projects of New York City, it felt more like a concrete graveyard. Buildings loomed over us, gray and lifeless, the sky a permanent shade of bleak. My world was a monotone of broken dreams and stifled screams, where the buzzing of broken streetlights replaced the chirping of crickets at night. It's in this setting that my obsession with vampirism began. Not the glamorous Hollywood type, with their fancy capes and noble battles over eternal love. No, I was drawn to the darkness of it, the power and the escape it offered. To me, vampires were not monsters, but beings who transcended their human weaknesses, who stood apart from the decay that surrounded me. I envied their freedom, their strength, and their eternal life amidst the darkness. It was my escape from a reality that offered me nothing but despair. This story, my story, isn't for the faint-hearted. It's a journey through the night, into the shadows of the human soul, where the line between man and monster blurs. So, if you're ready, let me take you back to the beginning, to a time when my life changed forever, in ways I could never have imagined. Welcome to the world of the vampire's shadow. My life, like those of many others in the shadow of the city's forgotten towers, was a cycle of worn-out routines and faded dreams. School was a battleground, not of intellect, but of survival. The teachers looked through me, seeing not a student eager to learn, but a statistic waiting to drop out. My classmates, a mix of jaded youths and hardened survivors of their own domestic battlegrounds, had no interest in camaraderie. I was a ghost among them, present but inconsequential, my fascination with the darker corners of literature and history marking me as an outsider. Home wasn't a sanctuary but another stage for conflict. My mother, worn thin by double shifts and the weight of disappointment, had little energy left for anything beyond survival. Our conversations, on the rare occasions they happened, were staccato exchanges of necessities and grievances. My father was absent, a specter of a promise of what a family might have been. In the confines of our cramped apartment, cluttered with the debris of unfulfilled aspirations, I felt more caged than sheltered. The sense of not belonging was a cloak I wore daily, heavy and suffocating. It wasn't just the alienation from my peers or the disconnect with my family, it was a profound dissonance with the world itself. Everywhere I looked, I saw systems and structures designed to perpetuate cycles of despair, buildings that blocked the sky and streets that led nowhere. The city, with its endless noise and motion, seemed a paradoxical monument to loneliness. In this world of shadowed dreams and muted cries, my fascination with vampirism flourished. It was more than an escape, it was a rebellion against the daylight world that had no place for me. Vampires, in their nocturnal realm, were masters of their fate, unbound by the petty constraints of society. They were outsiders, yes, but powerful ones, who navigated the darkness with grace and authority. This contrast between their world and mine became my obsession, my beacon in the night. My daily life was a testament to this inner turmoil. Each day was a step through a mist of disconnection, each interaction a reminder of my isolation. The world around me was a puzzle of which I could not find my piece, a story in which I had no role. And so, I retreated further into the night, into the lore and myth that promised not just an escape, but a transformation. It all began innocuously enough, a simple curiosity sparked by a tattered book found in the corner of the school library, a volume misplaced and forgotten, much like myself. The book, with its ancient cracked leather cover, whispered promises of secrets and power. Its pages were filled with tales of the night's children, beings who defied death and danced in the shadows. As I turned those pages, something within me clicked, as if I'd found the key to a door I hadn't realized was locked. Vampirism, with its rich lore and dark allure, became more than just a fascination, it evolved into an obsession. I devoured every piece of literature on the subject, from classic tales like Bram Stoker's Dracula, to the obscure scribblings of forgotten poets who spoke of the night in hushed tones. The internet became my hunting ground, a place where I could explore the depths of this dark culture, connecting with others who shared my fascination, though I kept my distance, observing from the shadows rather than engaging. This obsession wasn't merely academic. I saw in vampirism a metaphor for my own life and existence on the fringes, misunderstood and maligned. But whereas I was powerless to escape my circumstances, vampires wielded their outsider status like a weapon. They were powerful, feared, and, in their own way, free. The more I immersed myself in their world, the more I believed that perhaps, in embracing their ways, I could find an escape from my own dreary existence. I began to mimic the habits I read about, staying up late into the night to feel closer to the world of the undead. I experimented with my appearance, my clothes growing darker, my demeanor more aloof. I shunned the daylight, not just metaphorically but physically, finding solace in the quiet of the night. The city's nightlife, previously a distant buzz, now called to me, promising secrets and wonders hidden from the sun's scrutinizing gaze. This wasn't just about escapism. It was a transformation. In the lore of vampires, I found not just tales of horror and seduction, but a narrative of empowerment. These creatures, bound by no mortal coil, represented a form of rebellion against the natural order, against a society that had no place for someone like me. My obsession gave me a sense of identity and purpose, albeit one shrouded in darkness. It was a dangerous path, I knew, but danger seemed a small price for a taste of power and freedom. It was during one of my nocturnal escapades into the world of the undead, hidden behind the glowing screen of my computer, that she first appeared. Lila, the new girl in school, seemed to materialize from the very shadows I was so drawn to. With her arrival, my solitary journey into the night found an unexpected companion. She was an enigma, wrapped in the mystery of her sudden appearance in the middle of the semester, with no backstory to tell and no history to share. Her past was a blank canvas, or perhaps a closed book she chose not to open. Our first encounter was anything but dramatic. A simple bump in the hallway, an exchange of apologies, and a shared glance that lingered a second too long. But in that moment, there was a spark, an unspoken recognition of something deeper, something darker that lay beneath the surface of our everyday facades. Lila's eyes, dark and knowing, seemed to pierce through the veil of mundanity that shrouded the school corridors. In the days that followed, our paths crossed with increasing frequency. It wasn't long before we found ourselves seated together in the dimly lit corner of the school library, surrounded by books that spoke of ancient curses and whispered tales of the night. Lila, with her raven hair and pale skin, could have walked out of any of the gothic novels we pored over. Yet, there was a warmth to her, a flicker of genuine curiosity and shared longing for escape that drew me in. Lila shared my fascination with the vampiric lore, but her interest seemed to come from a place of profound personal connection, rather than mere curiosity. She spoke of the night creatures with a reverence and understanding that went beyond the academic. Her insights into their mythos, their symbolic representation of freedom and power, were both intriguing and unsettling. There was a depth to her understanding, a resonance with the darkness, that suggested her bond with the subject was more than just intellectual. As our friendship deepened, so did the mystery surrounding her. Lila was guarded about her life, revealing little about where she came from, or why she had moved to the city. Her presence in my life was like a puzzle, each piece revealing a bit more of the picture, yet leaving the whole unclear. She had no social media footprint, no circle of friends she mentioned, and her answers about her past were always vague and deflective. Despite, or perhaps because of, the mystery surrounding her, I found myself drawn to Lila in a way I had never been drawn to anyone before. She was a mirror reflecting my own darkness, yet promising the possibility of understanding and acceptance. In her, I saw a kindred spirit, someone who not only shared my obsessions, but seemed to embody them. Our bond was forged not just in shared interests, but in the recognition of the darkness within each other. Lila, with her mysterious past and her keen insight into the shadows that fascinated us, became not just a friend, but a beacon in the dark landscape of my life. As the days turned into weeks, Lila and I found ourselves ensnared in a web of shared secrets and midnight wanderings. New York City, with its endless labyrinth of streets and its canopy of artificial stars, became our playground. We explored its darkest corners, where the veil between the mundane and the magical seemed thinnest, always under the cover of night. These excursions were our rituals, sacred and exhilarating, each night a promise of discovery. Our conversations delved. The city at night became a character in our story, its shadows playing host to our adventures. We walked through parks transformed by moonlight into realms of silver and shadow, our footsteps echoing on paths less traveled. The city's iconic landmarks, seen through the lens of our nocturnal escapades, took on new meanings. The Empire State Building, a towering beacon in the night, reminded us of the lofty heights we yearned to reach, not in fame or fortune, but in freedom from the mundane. Lila introduced me to hidden places she had discovered, spots in the city where the modern and the ancient seemed to converge. alleyways that preserved the echo of centuries past, rooftops that offered vistas of the city's beating heart, and abandoned subway stations that whispered secrets of a bygone era. Each location was a chapter in our ongoing exploration of the night, a testament to our quest for a place where we could belong. Our nighttime journeys were not just physical but emotional, each adventure bringing us closer to understanding the essence of who we were. Lila, with her mysterious past and her intuitive connection to the shadows, guided me towards a deeper comprehension of my own darkness. Together, we shared a sense of being apart from the world, yet at the same time, more deeply connected to it than we had ever felt in daylight. It was during these nocturnal explorations that the boundaries between our individual selves began to blur. We shared our hopes, our fears, and our darkest thoughts, revealing parts of ourselves that we had never shown to anyone else. Our relationship evolved beyond friendship, becoming a partnership of souls journeying together through the night. Yet, as close as we became, Lila remained an enigma, her past a puzzle I was slowly piecing together. Her reluctance to talk about herself only added layers to the mystery, making each revelation a precious gift. Despite this, or perhaps because of it, my trust in her never wavered. Lila had become my confidant, my guide, and my companion in the quest for meaning in the darkness that both surrounded and filled us. As the bond between Lila and me grew, our explorations took a turn towards the more esoteric and intense aspects of the vampire subculture. Lila, with her mysterious past and a seemingly intrinsic understanding of the night, became my guide into realms I had previously only brushed against in my solitary research. One crisp autumn evening, Lila took me to an underground club known only to those deeply embedded in the subculture. The entrance was hidden away in an alley, marked by no sign, just a symbol known to those who belonged. Stepping inside, I felt as if we had crossed into another world, a realm where the night reigned eternal, and its denizens reveled in their escape from the mundane. The club was a cavernous space, lit by flickering candles and the occasional flash of colored lights. The air was thick with the scent of incense and something more primal, a musk that spoke of unrestrained desires. The people there, dressed in a myriad of styles that ranged from gothic elegance to punk rebellion, all shared a common intensity in their eyes. It was as if they, too, were searching for something in the darkness, a piece of themselves that could only be found in the embrace of the night. Lila introduced me to the rituals of the subculture, practices that blurred the line between performance and reality. There were ceremonies that mimicked the ancient rites of blood and shadow, where participants shared in the symbolic act of feeding, their bond sealed by the taste of full crimson. These rituals, Lila explained, were not mere theatrics, but a profound expression of trust and unity among those who felt alienated by the daylight world. Through Lila, I learned of the philosophies that underpinned the vampire subculture, a complex blend of nihilism and romanticism, a yearning for transcendence, coupled with a deep-seated disillusionment with society. It was a worldview that resonated with me, echoing my own feelings of disconnection and my desire for something beyond the ordinary. As we delved deeper, Lila shared with me the concept of the psychic vampire, individuals who claimed to feed not on blood but on energy, drawing vitality from the emotions and spirits of those around them. This idea fascinated me, offering a metaphor for the way we all, in some way, feed off each other in our quest for connection and meaning. Lila's introduction to these more intense aspects of the vampire subculture was a revelation. It was not just about adopting an aesthetic or engaging in superficial rituals, it was about finding a sense of identity and belonging in a world that often felt alienating. The people I met through Lila, with their diverse expressions of darkness and light, became a kind of family, a community that accepted me without question. Yet, as much as I was drawn into this world, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Lila's involvement than she let on. Her knowledge of the rituals, her ease among the denizens of the night, and her vague hints at personal experiences that mirrored the lore we celebrated, all suggested a connection to the vampire subculture that went beyond mere fascination. In those moments, as we danced on the edge of darkness, I saw in Lila a reflection of my own search for meaning. Together, we navigated the shadowy waters of a subculture that promised escape and empowerment, even as it veiled its deeper truths in mystery and metaphor. As the weeks melded into a singular, continuous night, my journey with Lila into the heart of the vampire subculture transformed me. What began as a fascination, a mere flirtation with the edges of darkness, spiraled into an all-consuming obsession. The rituals, the lore, the sense of belonging among those who embraced the nighted, all began to seep into the very core of my being, blurring the lines between the fantastical and the real. The underground gatherings, the shared secrets under the cloak of darkness, and the rituals of blood and shadow had become my new reality. Each night spent in the embrace of the subculture peeled away layers of the person I once was, revealing someone or something new. I found myself looking in the mirror, expecting to see a stranger, someone marked by the night, changed in some fundamental way that was visible to the eye. Yet, the reflection that stared back was deceptively ordinary, a facade that belied the tumult within. My thoughts began to wander down dark alleys of possibility. What if the myths and legends we celebrated were rooted in truth? The lines between the symbolic and the literal, once so clear, now seemed arbitrary. I toyed with the idea of actual vampirism, of a transformation that could elevate me above the mundane world, granting me the power and freedom I so craved. This wasn't the idle daydreaming of before, it felt urgent, a calling that I was destined to answer. Lila, ever the enigma, both fueled and tempered my growing obsession. She listened to my wild speculations with a quiet intensity, never dismissing them outright, yet never fully endorsing them either. Her cryptic responses and the hints of something more behind her knowledge of the subculture only deepened my resolve. I began to see her not just as a guide or companion, but as a gatekeeper to some profound truth I was on the cusp of uncovering. The boundaries between my life in the daylight and my excursions into the night began to erode. School, once a dreary but necessary part of my existence, became an afterthought, a distant shore fading into the fog as I sailed further into uncharted waters. My relationship with my mother, strained to begin with, frayed to the breaking point as she watched her son become a stranger, lost to a world she could not understand or reach. In my heart, a dangerous notion took root, the idea that I could become something more than human, that the rituals and beliefs of the vampire subculture could be a pathway to a real transformation. It was a seductive thought, one that promised an escape from all the pain and loneliness of my past, a rebirth into a life of power and mystery. Yet, even as I pursued this fantasy, a part of me recognized a peril in this path. The stories and legends I had once devoured with a detached fascination now seemed like signposts on a road to somewhere dark and irreversible. The rituals, once symbolic acts of defiance and belonging, started to feel like steps in a dance whose final pose was something monstrous. The blur between fantasy and reality was not just a confusion of the mind, it was a schism in my soul, a war between the desire to transcend my human limitations and the fear of losing myself to the darkness I courted. In this liminal space, where shadows whispered of power and eternity, I stood on the brink, poised between two worlds, each calling me home. My descent into the depths of the vampire subculture was not without its consequences. The further I ventured into adopting a lifestyle that mirrored the nocturnal creatures of my obsession, the more pronounced the effects became on both my health and my relationships. It was as if, in my quest to transcend my human confines, I was becoming untethered from the very essence of life itself. Sleep became an elusive specter, chased away by nights spent in pursuit of a deeper connection to the darkness. My days were haunted by fatigue, a constant dragging weariness that clouded my thoughts and dulled my senses. The sun, once merely a backdrop to my daily routine, became an adversary, its light harsh and unyielding, a reminder of a world I no longer felt a part of. My diet, too, transformed. I experimented with fasting, believing it would purify me, prepare me for the transformation I saw. The physical toll, however, paled in comparison to the strain on my relationships. My mother, already struggling to connect with the son who seemed to drift further away with each passing day, watched helplessly as I retreated into a world she could neither see nor comprehend. Our interactions became fraught with tension, a dance around the chasm that had opened between us. I could see the worry in her eyes, hear the unspoken fear in her voice, but I was too far gone, too enthralled by the promise of becoming something other than the disappointment I felt I had always been. School became a distant concern, a mundane obligation that I fulfilled with minimal effort. My grades, once passable, slipped into a descent that mirrored my own. Teachers and classmates became part of the scenery, background noise to the siren song that called me each night. I isolated myself, eschewing former acquaintances and any semblance of social life for the company of shadows and the few like-minded individuals I met through Lila. Even my relationship with Lila, the one person who understood the path I was on, began to show cracks. As my commitment to adopting the vampire lifestyle deepened, so too did my expectations of our connection. I sought in her a mentor, a guide who could lead me to the transformation I sought, but the deeper I dove, the more reserved she became. It was as if she knew the destination of the path I walked, and her reluctance to join me in those final steps became a source of tension between us. The irony of my situation was not lost on me. In my pursuit of a connection to something greater, something eternal, I had never felt more isolated. The lifestyle I adopted, meant to elevate me above the human condition, instead left me hovering on the fringes, caught between worlds. My health, both physical and mental, and my relationships with those who cared for me suffered under the weight of my obsession. I was transforming, yes, but into what, I was no longer sure. The deeper I sank into the lifestyle and rituals of the vampire subculture, the more Lila's enigmatic presence began to unravel, revealing a complex web of secrets and shadows that extended far beyond our nocturnal escapades. It was a gradual unveiling, pieces of a puzzle that I had not even realized were missing, slowly coming together to form a picture that was as shocking as it was inconceivable. Lila, the mysterious figure who had guided me into the depths of the night, harbored connections to a reality far darker than any lore or myth we had explored together. It began with subtle hints, whispers at the edges of our conversations, a name dropped in passing, an unexplained absence, a flash of fear or perhaps guilt in her eyes at unexpected moments. These were the first threads, the ones that, when pulled, would unravel the fabric of the world we had built together. My initial discoveries were accidental, stumbled upon in my quest to understand Lila better. A forgotten phone left unattended, its messages a breadcrumb trail leading into the underbelly of the city's nightlife. Here, amid the texts and emails, were the first real clues to Lila's double life. She was connected to a group that styled themselves as the true custodians of the vampire mythos, but beneath the veneer of cultural preservation and celebration, there was a darker purpose. This group, which Lila had been cautious to keep me away from, was not just another sect of the subculture, they were exploiters of it. They used the allure of the vampire mythos to draw in those lost souls searching for belonging, only to entangle them in a network of illicit activities that ranged from the illegal trade of artifacts and substances to more sinister dealings that preyed on the vulnerabilities of the subculture's most devoted followers. The realization hit me with the force of a betrayal. The rituals and gatherings that I had believed were expressions of our shared identity were, to this group, merely tools for manipulation and control. Lila's involvement with them painted her in a light I was reluctant to acknowledge. Was she an unwilling participant, coerced into her role within this shadowy organization, or was she a willing accomplice, her guidance a calculated manipulation to draw me deeper into their web? As I confronted Lila with my discoveries, the facade of our shared adventure crumbled. She admitted her ties to the group, but her explanations were a tangled mix of justification and regret. She spoke of debts and obligations, of choices made in moments of desperation, and of her efforts to shield me from the worst of what her association with the group entailed. Yet, her confessions only served to deepen the chasm between us, transforming her from the mysterious figure of allure into a tragic protagonist caught in a narrative far more complex and dangerous than anything our imaginations had conjured. Lila's dark secret was a mirror reflecting the truth about the world we had immersed ourselves in, a world that preyed on the dreams and desires of those who felt most alienated by society. The revelation of her ties to a real-life crime ring exploiting the vampire subculture marked the end of innocence for our journey together. It was a stark reminder that behind the romanticized veil of night and shadow lay real dangers, ones that could not be banished by daylight or dispelled by turning the page on a story. The fantasy we had lived became a cautionary tale, a lesson in the price of delving too deeply into the darkness. In the aftermath of discovering Lila's connections to the darker underbelly of the vampire subculture, a profound sense of betrayal and disillusionment took root within me. Yet, paradoxically, this revelation did not quench my thirst for transformation. Instead, it fanned the flames of my desire to turn, to cross the threshold from human to something more. This yearning, once a distant dream fueled by fantasy and role-play, morphed into a dangerous obsession, blurring the lines between desperation and determination. With Lila's secret laid bare, our partnership fractured, leaving me to navigate the shadowy path alone. I found myself withdrawing from her and the group, mistrust seeding a cold divide. Yet, the idea of transformation, of becoming a creature of the night, remained an irresistible lure. It became a singular focus, a beacon in the darkness that promised power, freedom, and escape from the chains of my human frailty and the pain of betrayal. Driven by this escalating desire, I began to explore the fringes of the subculture, seeking out those who claimed knowledge or experience in the actual process of turning. My inquiries led me down a rabbit hole of rituals, blood rites, and arcane practices, each more esoteric and dangerous than the last. I encountered individuals who, seduced by the allure of immortality and strength, had experimented with their bodies and minds, often with harrowing consequences. Yet, even their warnings, their tales of loss and madness, could not deter me. If anything, they only served to heighten my resolve, as if the very danger they spoke of was proof of the transformation's reality and attainability. My behavior grew increasingly reckless. I experimented with rituals of my own devising, combining lore from ancient texts with the dubious advice of those I met in the shadowy corners of the subculture. Nights were spent in cemeteries and abandoned places, attempting to commune with the essence of the vampire through blood offerings and invocations. I sought out the company of those who claimed to have crossed the boundary between human and vampire, enduring their trials and tests, in the hope of finding the key to my own transformation. This pursuit consumed me, each failed attempt driving me deeper into a maelix of frustration and desperation. My health deteriorated, the physical toll of my nocturnal activities and experimental practices leaving me weakened, my appearance more gaunt and ghostly than ever. Yet, in my mind, these were but the necessary sacrifices on the path to becoming other. The dangers of my obsession were not just physical. I found myself on the fringes of legality, my actions brushing against the dark underbelly of the subculture Lila had been entangled with. My inquiries and experiments attracted the attention of those who saw in my desperation an opportunity for exploitation. I was drawn into a world of illicit trade, where the currency was not just money but blood and loyalty. In my quest for transformation, I lost sight of the line between dedication and delusion. The pursuit of becoming a vampire, once a metaphor for escape and empowerment, had become a literal goal, driving me to the edge of sanity and society. I was blind to the destructive path I was on, unable to see the precipice until I was teetering on the brink. My desire to turn had led me into the heart of darkness, far from the romanticized visions of vampirism that had once captivated me. It was a journey marked by danger, a testament to the peril of confusing fantasy with reality in the pursuit of an impossible dream. As my obsession reached its zenith, the distinction between fantasy and the harsh realities of the world I had delved into became increasingly indistinct. Driven by a desperate need to actualize my transformation, I conceived a plan for a ritual that I believed would finally allow me to cross the threshold into the vampiric existence I so craved. It was a culmination of all I had learned, a synthesis of the arcane and the dangerous, gleaned from the fringes of the vampire subculture and the dark corners of my own mind. Central to this ritual, paradoxically, was Lila, the one who had initiated me into this world, and the one whose secrets had merely driven me from it. I approached Lila with a mixture of trepidation and resolve. Our relationship had been strained, the trust we once shared frayed by revelations and secrets. Yet, I believed that she alone could understand the significance of what I was attempting. To my surprise, Lila did not dismiss my plan outright. Whether it was a sense of loyalty to our past connection, a lingering affection, or perhaps her own curiosity and entanglement in the dark tapestry of the subculture, she agreed to be part of the ritual. The ritual was to be conducted at the new moon, a night of darkness and potential, according to the lore. I had chosen an abandoned building that loomed like a mausoleum in the heart of the city's forgotten district, a place where the veil between the worlds fell thin, charged with the residue of countless lost hopes and dreams. Here, surrounded by decay and shadow, I believed we could tap into the energies necessary for my transformation. Preparations were meticulous, an amalgamation of the symbolic and the literal. I gathered the required materials, drawing from the esoteric recipes and instructions I had amassed. Candles to light the darkness, symbols drawn in chalk and blood to mark the boundaries of our sacred space, and a chalice that would hold the elixir of transformation, a concoction of my own design, infused with ingredients both rare and mundane, symbolic of death and rebirth. Lila's role was multifaceted. Part guide, part participant, and part witness. She was to lead the incantations, her voice a bridge between my human state and the darkness I sought to embrace. Her presence, I believed, would anchor me to this reality, even as I reached out to touch the eternal night of vampiric existence. As the night of the ritual approached, the boundary between excitement and fear became blurred. I felt as if I were standing on the edge of a precipice, the wind whispering of unknown lands just beyond sight. The ritual was more than just an attempt at transformation. It was a declaration of my willingness to forsake the human world for a chance to touch the divine darkness. When the night arrived, Lila and I entered the chosen space, the air heavy with anticipation and the weight of unseen eyes. The candles flickered to life, casting long shadows that danced across the decrepit walls. We began the ritual with solemnity, reciting the incantations and performing the rites as I had envisioned them. The elixir, dark and potent, passed my lips, its taste a harbinger of the change I sought. But as the ritual progressed, the lines between reality and the dark fantasy I had pursued began to warp and weave in ways I hadn't anticipated. The shadows seemed to pulse with life, the air to thicken with power and possibility. Yet, amidst the crescendo of our rites, a gnawing doubt began to take root in my heart, a realization of the magnitude and potential folly of what I was attempting. The ritual, intended to be the culmination of my journey into darkness, became instead a crucible, testing the very foundations of my beliefs and desires. In the flickering candlelight, with Lila at my side, I confronted the truth that the transformation I sought was not just about escaping the human condition, but confronting the darkness within myself, a darkness that did not require a ritual to exist, but acknowledgement and acceptance. The ritual, set against the backdrop of an abandoned building's haunting silhouette, began under a mantle of eerie anticipation. Lila and I, enshrouded in the night's embrace, embarked on what I believed to be the final step toward my transformation. However, as the ritual unfolded, the atmosphere, charged with a tangible sense of power, began to shift, unveiling the grim reality beneath the veneer of our shared endeavor. Midway through the incantations and symbolic gestures, an unsettling clarity began to pierce the fog of my obsession. The potent elixir, which I had assumed would be the catalyst for my metamorphosis, ignited a feverish lucidity instead of the expected transcendence. As my body rejected the concoction, a violent sickness overwhelming me, the stark truth of my delusion came crashing down. The transformation I had yearned for, the escape from my mortal constraints, was not to be found in rituals or potions. It was a fantasy, a dangerous flirtation with forces that did not yield change, but revealed the depths of my own self-deception. In this moment of vulnerability, Lila's role in the night's proceedings took on a sinister hue. The support and understanding I thought we shared fractured, exposing a manipulation I had been too blinded by desperation to see. Lila, far from being the companion and guide I believed her to be, had her own agenda, one that exploited my obsession for purposes I had not fathomed. As the ritual disintegrated into chaos, Lila's true intention surfaced. The group she was entwined with had no interest in fostering genuine transformations or exploring the mystical boundaries of the vampire subculture. Instead, they preyed on the vulnerable, those like me who sought belonging and purpose in the shadows. Lila had been a lure, drawing me deeper into their web with the promise of transformation, only to use my desperation as a means to further their own shadowy ends. The revelation of Lila's manipulation, juxtaposed against the backdrop of my crumbling delusion, was a bitter potion. The darkness I had sought so fervently was not a realm of power and escape, but a landscape of exploitation and deceit. My pursuit of a vampiric existence, driven by a desire to transcend my perceived mediocrity, had blinded me to the manipulations of those who wielded the mythos, not as a beacon of self-discovery, but as a tool for control. In the aftermath of the failed ritual, as I grappled with the physical and emotional fallout of my folly, the depth of my delusion became painfully clear. The transformation I had envisioned, the crossing of a mystical threshold into a new existence, was a fantasy. The real transformation required was one of self-realization and acceptance, a journey back from the brink of a self-imposed exile into darkness. Lila's betrayal, though a devastating blow, served as a cruel catalyst for this awakening. The night that had promised to be the culmination of my transformation instead revealed the true nature of the path I had chosen, a path lined with deception, both self-inflicted and externally imposed. In seeking to become something other, I had lost sight of my humanity, and in the process, fallen prey to those who sought to exploit my yearning for belonging and identity. In the wake of the ritual's disastrous end and the unveiling of Lila's manipulation, my world was a maelix of betrayal, disillusionment, and a desperate need for retribution. The revelation that my quest for transformation had been nothing but a pawn in a darker game played by the crime ring entwined with the vampire subculture, ignited a fury within me. It was this rage, raw and unbridled, that drove me towards a confrontation with those who had exploited my vulnerabilities. The crime ring, a nebulous entity that had lurked in the shadows of my journey, suddenly became the focus of my wrath. Their manipulation of the vampire mythos, preying on those seeking solace or transformation, was a betrayal of everything I had believed in. My initial desire for transformation morphed into a quest for justice, not just for myself, but for others ensnared in their deceptive web. Armed with nothing but the remnants of my shattered dreams and a deep-seated need for vengeance, I sought them out, tracing the threads of Lila's connections to their hidden sanctum. It was in the heart of the city's forgotten districts, beneath the veneer of an abandoned warehouse, that I found them. The confrontation that ensued was not the calculated clash of heroes and villains, but a chaotic eruption of pent-up fury against cold, calculated malice. The violence that unfolded was both literal and symbolic, a physical manifestation of the internal struggle I had faced. The crime ring, taken aback by the ferocity of my assault, responded with ruthless efficiency. The air was thick with the scent of blood and the harsh sound of conflict, a grim ballet set to the discordant symphony of pain and desperation. Lila, caught between her allegiances to the crime ring and the remnants of our fractured bond, played a pivotal role in the unfolding tragedy. In the chaos, she made a choice, siding with me against her former compatriots in a moment of redemption or perhaps penance for her role in my manipulation. The decision was her undoing, as the violence that I had unleashed consumed her as well. The confrontation reached its zenith in a moment of stark clarity amidst the bloodshed. The leaders of the crime ring, cornered and desperate, revealed the depth of their depravity, their willingness to sacrifice their own in a bid for escape. It was a microcosm of the larger exploitation that had drawn me into their orbit, a disregard for human life in the pursuit of their own twisted ends. In the end, the warehouse, a silent witness to the night's events, was a tableau of tragedy. The crime ring was dismantled, but at a great cost. Lila lay among the casualties, her life a final sacrifice in the battle against the darkness she had once navigated with such confidence. The victory, if it could be called that, was Pyrrhic. The shadows that had promised transformation and escape had instead delivered a harsh lesson in the reality of my quest. The bloody confrontation was a catharsis, a purging of the illusions that had led me to the brink. But it was also a reminder of the cost of delusion, of the price paid in blood and soul when fantasy and reality collide. In seeking to become something more than human, I had been confronted with, as the authorities sifted through the aftermath, the details of my involvement with the crime ring and the subculture that had so consumed me were laid bare. The media painted a sensational picture, a tale of obsession turned deadly, a young life derailed by the allure of darkness. But beyond the headlines and the public's morbid fascination, I grappled with the weight of my own guilt and the realization of the impact of my actions. The loss of Lila, the one person who had journeyed with me into the depths, weighed heavily on my soul. Her final act, a choice to stand with me against the darkness she had once navigated, was a bitter reminder of the complexity of human connections. I mourned not just for her, but for what her death represented, a final severing of the ties to a world I had once believed in, a world that had ultimately consumed her. My family, already distant, was shattered by the revelations of my actions. My mother, who had watched helplessly as I drifted further into the night, was now forced to reckon with the reality of her son's involvement in a tale of violence and manipulation. The chasm between us, once a silent gap of misunderstanding and unspoken frustrations, was now a gaping wound, marked by the public scrutiny and the shared trauma of my actions. Legally, I found myself entangled in a web of consequences. My involvement with the crime ring, however unintentional, had legal ramifications that threatened to define the rest of my life. The pursuit of my transformation, once a personal quest, had spilled over into the public domain, its outcomes a matter of record and retribution. Emotionally, the aftermath was a desolate landscape. The realization of the consequences of my actions, a journey that had begun with a longing for escape and ended in violence and loss, left me adrift. The community I had sought to belong to, the subculture that had promised a sense of identity and power, was revealed to be a mirage, its allure a dangerous lie that preyed on the vulnerabilities of those who, like me, were searching for meaning in the shadows. In the days that followed, as I navigated the fallout of the night's events, I was forced to confront the reality of my journey. The quest for transformation, for an identity forged in the crucible of the vampire mythos, had been a delusion, a flight from the complexities and pains of the human condition. The cost of that delusion was written in the blood of those caught in its wake, a stark reminder of the dangers of losing oneself in the pursuit of an impossible ideal. The aftermath of the confrontation was a crucible, burning away the illusions that had driven me to the brink. In their place, a painful clarity emerged, a recognition of the need to reconcile with the consequences of my actions, and to find a way forward in a world irrevocably altered by my descent into darkness. It was a realization that the true transformation required was not one of escaping humanity, but of embracing it, of finding strength not in the mythos of the night, but in the resilience of the human spirit to overcome the shadows of its own making. The aftermath of the tragedy forced me back into a reality I had long sought to escape. This reality was no longer defined by the shadows I had chased or the fantasies I had constructed, but by the tangible, stark consequences of my actions. The process of dealing with both the legal repercussions and the emotional devastation was a journey through a landscape more daunting than any night I had wandered. Legally, I was thrust into a mêlée of inquiries, investigations, and proceedings. The authorities, having unraveled the web of my involvement with the crime ring and the events leading to the confrontation, were relentless. My actions, driven by a misguided obsession, were now subject to the cold scrutiny of the law. Each decision I had made, each step I had taken down the path that led to that fateful night, was dissected and examined, not for signs of the supernatural transformation I had sought, but for evidence of my culpability in the violence that had ensued. The legal battle was a grim education in responsibility and consequence. The potential for incarceration loomed large, a stark reminder of how far I had strayed from the person I once was. In navigating the complexities of the justice system, I found an unlikely form of solace. The very process that sought to hold me accountable also forced me to confront the reality of my actions, to understand the gravity of the choices I had made in the pursuit of an illusory escape from my own humanity. Emotionally, the fallout was a tempest of guilt, grief, and a profound sense of loss. The realization of the harm I had caused, both to those who had been drawn into my orbit and to myself, was a burden that I struggled to bear. The deaths, especially Lyle's, were wounds that seemed insurmountable, each a reminder of the cost of my obsession. The community I had sought to escape, including my family, now appeared in a different light, a potential source of healing and understanding, rather than the prison I had once perceived. My return to reality was also a process of reintegration, of learning to navigate the world I had tried so desperately to leave behind. This meant rebuilding bridges with my family, attempting to mend the rifts that my actions had caused. My mother, despite the pain and disappointment, remained a beacon of unconditional love, her support a lifeline in the tumultuous sea of my emotions. The emotional journey was mirrored by a tentative re-engagement with society. The stigma of my involvement with the crime ring and the sensational nature of the events meant that my return was met with wariness and, in some cases, outright hostility. Yet, it was in this challenging environment that I found unexpected allies, individuals who saw beyond the headlines to the deeply flawed human beings seeking redemption and the path forward. This period of my life, marked by the harsh light of day rather than the seductive shadows of the night, was a time of profound transformation. It was not the transformation I had once sought in the lore of vampirism, but a far more painful and necessary change. It was a reclamation of my humanity, a gradual acceptance of my flaws and failures, and a commitment to facing the consequences of my actions. The return to reality, dealing with the legal and emotional fallout, was a journey from darkness into a different kind of light, one that illuminated the complexities of the human condition, the capacity for change, and the possibility of forgiveness. It was a testament to the strength that can be found in facing one's demons, not in the shadows of fantasy, but in the harsh, redemptive light of truth and responsibility. As I stand now on the far side of the events that once consumed me, the reflection I see in the mirror is that of someone irrevocably changed. The journey into the heart of darkness, guided by a misguided quest for transformation, has left indelible marks on my soul, scars that speak of both the folly of my pursuits and the hard-earned wisdom that came from them. This reflection, while a constant reminder of the past, also hints at the personal growth that has been my companion in the aftermath. The trauma of what transpired, the manipulation, the confrontation, and the loss lingers like a shadow that never fully recedes. It is a part of me now, a dark tapestry woven into the very fabric of my being. The nights of seeking and the moments of revelation have taught me lessons in humility, in the value of humanity, and in the strength required to face the consequences of one's actions. Yet, this knowledge comes at a cost, a weight that I carry with me into each new day. The process of healing has been slow, a path fraught with obstacles and setbacks. The trauma of the past, while diminishing, never truly leaves. It emerges in quiet moments, in the stillness of the night, a whisper of what was and a cautionary tale of what could have been. This lingering pain serves as a constant reminder of my journey, a shadow that shapes my present and future. Despite the trauma, or perhaps because of it, I have grown. The person who once sought escape in the darkness now seeks understanding in the light. The fantasies that once enthralled me have given way to a search for meaning and purpose within the bounds of the real world. This growth has not been a solitary journey, it has been aided by the support of those who stood by me, offering forgiveness and understanding, and by those who challenged me to confront the truth of my actions. The experience has imbued me with a newfound appreciation for the complexity of the human spirit, for the capacity to endure, to change, and to emerge from the depths of despair with a sense of clarity and purpose. It has taught me the value of confronting one's demons, not in the realm of fantasy, but in the harsh light of reality. The pursuit of transformation, once an external quest for power and escape, has become an internal journey towards acceptance, resilience, and the discovery of a strength that lies not in the shadows, but in the light of self-awareness and redemption. As I reflect on the path that led me here, I recognize that the journey is far from over. The personal growth I have experienced is not a destination but a process, one that continues with each step forward. The trauma, while a part of me, does not define me. It is a chapter in my story, a testament to the human capacity for error and redemption. In this reflection, I see not just the scars of the past, but the potential for the future, a future built on the lessons learned in the darkest of nights, and the hope that comes with the dawn. Years have passed since the events that once defined my existence unfolded in the darkness of a world I thought I understood. As I pen this epilogue, the distance of time has lent a perspective that was once obscured by the tumult of my own making. The journey from the depths of obsession and the aftermath of tragedy has been long and fraught with reflection, a path that has led me through valleys of despair and over peaks of introspection. The world around me has continued its inexorable march forward, indifferent to the trials of a solitary soul caught in the throes of a personal maelstrom. Yet, within this progression, I have found my own way, a route that meanders between the shadows of the past and the light of a future reimagined. I have come to understand that the transformation I so desperately sought in the lore of vampires and the rituals of the night was not a metamorphosis of flesh, but of spirit. The true change has been in how I perceive the world and my place within it. The darkness that once held a seductive allure has revealed itself to be a canvas, not of escape, but of growth, a backdrop against which the human condition unfolds in all its complexity. The scars of the past remain, indelible marks that serve as reminders of the journey I have undertaken. Yet, they no longer represent wounds, but badges of survival, symbols of a battle fought and a semblance of wisdom gained. The trauma, once a specter that haunted every step, has become a quiet companion, its presence a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit. My return to reality, fraught though it was with the challenges of reconciliation and redemption, has been a rebirth of sorts. In the aftermath of the confrontation and the dissolution of the fantasies that once governed my actions, I have found a new purpose. This purpose is not rooted in the shadows, but in the light of connections forged in sincerity and empathy, in the understanding that true strength lies in vulnerability and the courage to face one's flaws. The people in my life, those who stood by me through the darkest of nights and those who have joined me on the journey since, are the true anchors that keep me grounded. My relationships, once a source of turmoil, have become the foundation upon which I build my days. The lessons learned in the crucible of my experiences have taught me the value of these connections, the importance of compassion,